Hey there. So, my next guest, you actually probably would never have expected him to end up where he's at if you had known him when he was first starting college. And he tells us about this journey that he goes on. He starts as a graphic designer and then he goes into game design. And now he's working for an esports organization. And like he looks back and he's dumbfounded that his journey has taken him here, but he has so much information, so much knowledge locked up into him because of the specific journey he takes to get here. And like I see so many parallels in myself and this guy, and I just know you guys are going to love this interview. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Tom Panico. Hey there, Tom. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing today, Brad?
Oh, it's a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas. How about yourself?
It is a bleak, rainy day in Philadelphia, but I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of great work right now, so I can't really complain about anything.
I understand. I lived 9 years in Akron, Ohio, one of the
Oh
cloudiest
yeah,
cities in the country. So I literally did not see the sun for 6 months when I first moved there.
yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah,
All
winter in
right.
the Northeast.
That pretty much. All right. So, Tom, I like to get the show started just getting right into it. So, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
So I am the VP of a company called phillyesports. It's the most recent endeavor that I've undertaken. What phillyesports does is we host and execute concept, everything from start to finish, esports events in the Philadelphia area. We most notably work with colleges. We've worked with nonprofit organizations, as well as even the U.S. Army. So we go in almost any direction where somebody needs the expertise to build, activate, and execute esporting events. Outside of that, I have a very long, winding history going from designer for a film company, owned my own game design company, which I still do, but that's a little bit on the back burner right now. All the way to more mundane stuff like working in tech support. So I've been all over the place in as many directions as you can point in.
I love it. All right. Now, before I kind of get into any of that, and there's a lot there to unpack, I ask every single guest a single question. So I'm going to ask you just like I ask everybody else. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you, Tom?
Um, oh man, that depends a whole lot. I would say I rest comfortably between a 6 and a 7. Some people might push me up to an 8. Some people might say I'm as low as a 4, but I like to consider myself a 6, 7 kind of.
And
In
why do
terms
you
of how
say
weird.
that? What makes you weird?
Uh, well, the thing that's the most weird about me, I think, is the fact that I graduated from a business school after getting business grad school after getting an undergrad in art and illustration. So I went from one end of the professional spectrum all the way to the complete opposite end of the professional spectrum. Um, Outside of that, I mean, if you were to line me up against all my friends from when I was in art school, I'd be like, I'm one of the most boring kids on the block. If you line me up against everybody from business school, I'd be the weirdest one in the room every single time. So it depends on what community I'm in. The weirdest thing about me probably is it's not even that weird anymore. I'm super into anime. I'm super into video games. I'm super into board games. Me and my friends have the very weirdest sense of humor in the world. So I, I, I like to go in too many directions. I would say that's the weirdest thing about me.
Yeah, I love that question because I get that answer like all the time. And I
Right.
love it with like, I'm a 12. Like, why is that? Because I like anime and video games and tabletop games. I'm like,
It's not
who do
weird.
you think you're talking
Right.
to? All right. So, Tom, this is the gamerpreneur after all. So, why don't you
hmm
go ahead and just tell me a little bit about your gaming cred? When did you first start playing video games?
I mean, I don't think I can remember the first time I played a video game. There was always a Nintendo in the house. At the very least, there was always a Nintendo in the house. The first game that I remember is Zelda 2, Link's Journey. I remember watching my dad try and play it. sitting on the floor, cross-legged, staring up at the TV. And I just vividly remember the opening title screen of it, where you just have like this, gleaming white sword on the top of a mountain, overlooking an ocean with like twinkling stars. And I just immediately like felt so like almost like by magic pulled into like the mystery of what on earth was happening there. The world felt very big when I looked at that screen.
Oh, that game was really big, and there was no like hints really. Like you had to go town to town and actually talk to people to figure out what to do.
Oh yeah.
You guys can't see it, but I actually have both of the Zelda covers up here. It's like,
oh, I see the bottom of it with the gold, gold cover for the
one you see up
original.
there is the Legend of Zelda, but I have the other one on the Adventures of Link up on that wall there. Like those were
Nice.
some of my favorite games, and I never beat Zelda 2 until I had to sit down one day and play for 10 hours straight because the cart I had, the battery was dead, so there was no saving it.
Oh,
I had to play it in one shot to beat it.
wow. That is not an easy game.
No, not when you're first starting out, for sure.
No.
All right, so what do you play today then?
I play a ton of Destiny right now. I'm playing a ton of Sea of Thieves. My friends and I are actually doing a spooky October Dark Souls runs. I never finished any of the Dark Souls. It was too brutal for me. But when you got a team of 3, we just are like invading each other's worlds and we're just cheesing through all the bosses. So it's like, great. I got 2 friends who know all about it. I get to experience this without like all of the just punishing difficulty that comes with it. It's a nice, pleasant experience for me right now.
I love it. Okay, one more gaming question, then we'll move on to like the kind of business side of everything.
Sure thing.
If I put you on a desert island, you get one game, a power cable, and an Ethernet cord. What game is it?
Ooh, the Ethernet cable changes that. I would say right now, provided I can still access my friends list, Sea of Thieves. The emergent gameplay in that is just like I always like to point out, like, I didn't think this would show back up in the storyline whenever I'm playing a game. Like, there'd be like an island, like a tiny little island with like a pink plant. And I'm like, why the heck is that plant pink? And then 3 hours later, it's like, all right, there's the ship's down. I'm like literally guarding the treasure. There's sharks everywhere. I can see the pink plant island. And I'm like, God, how is that important? How is that important again? It's just, the situations that come out of that game are just so entirely impossible to expect and are always just delightful.
I love it. I love it. All right, now let's talk about the entrepreneurial side of things. So you're the VP of Philly Esports.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean for you? What is your job duties?
Yes.
Yes. Everything.
Basically, the way that I approach it is that my role is to expand the bandwidth of our CEO. So the CEO is responsible for everything in the company. Whatever he is not able to fit in with his existing bandwidth is what I need to step into and try and like pick that slack up for him. In addition to that, and this is not exclusive to my role as VP, but this is just my personal, my core competencies, as we say in business school. Product development and partnership development are the 2 things that I take ownership of for the most part within the company.
Fantastic. And how did you end up in this role? Because you kind of gave us a little bit about your professional history, and it was kind of this meandering journey to get here.
So after my life as a graphic designer came to an end, I jumped into working in IT because it was something I knew how to do. It was easy and it paid well for, not that much work. I was trying to get my own game design company off the ground, which was doing well, but it just became apparent that there was no way that was going to become like a completely sustainable source of income for me. That was a very much, 1 out of 1,000 people make it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in the board games market, not the video game market. So even like 95% of the board games market really is a bunch of hobby professionals that still had full-time jobs anyway.
Sure.
Not everybody gets to be Stone Meyer and make millions of dollars every year because they're like the most beloved board game designer. So while I was, fiddling around with that, I took this job working in IT. And through my board game company, I really fell in love with entrepreneurship. There was so many parallels between game design and business design. It's all problem solving.
Absolutely.
Like, well, we have this function that we know that we have a capability to execute on. Like you have a sword and you can swing it. In the case of Philly Esports, there's esports and we know how to organize esports events. Like being able to draw lines from what we can do and what we need to do, and then figuring out what are the missing pieces in between, kind of taught me how much I really love not just games, but systems at large. And systems they're in games, they're in business design, they're in course design for schools. They can be translated in so many different directions. And business was the one that I kind of was the most excited about, because it allowed me to partner with people and figure out, what do you do and why is what you do great? And if I partner you with this other person who does this other thing that's totally different but also awesome, what is the result of you two working together?
Fantastic. You didn't answer my question. How did you end up with Philly
Oh,
Esports?
right. That's it. I waxed poetic a little too long. When I was in my grad degree, one of my courses involved us getting assigned a business, where we would help them write a pitch deck for investors or partnerships or whatever that business needed. The teacher did a survey about our interests, and I still was very interested in working in games in some capacity. So I got connected with this company, Philly Esports. I worked with them first as a student, then as an intern, then as the head of their partnership development, and then finally as their VP.
I love it. Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about Philly Esports? Like, when did they start? What's their mission? Like, let's dive into that.
Sure. So it was founded in 2019 in January. So we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. The mission statement of Philly Esports is to empower gamers to achieve their goals within the discipline of esports. We want to provide as much opportunity to people who are interested in becoming competitive gamers as possible. The way that has kind of morphed and changed over the last year or so has been to identify colleges as the most ripe and fertile ground for support to help kids become more competitive to reach those like semi-pro professional levels. So that's what we're doing now, is focusing very heavily on colleges, as well as, elementary and high school as well, wherever we can. We're mostly college. We're moving into that realm. But we're developing different leagues and events that are geared towards the specific needs of colleges, and trying to find out some needs that they have that aren't quite being serviced by the existing college event organizers.
Fantastic. All right. Now, what kinds of challenges are you guys facing, as you go about this? Because I mean, esports is still, by and large, kind of considered a gaming, right? It's still the
Right.
games, and like you see it's not, haven't reached that like professional level yet.
Right. So it depends on who you talk to. And it depends on what we're doing at any given time, what our greatest challenges are.
You've definitely been to grad school. It depends is the go-to answer.
I mean, I hate to be that kind of person, but it's true. This month, our greatest challenge is scalability. We have so many different people that want to talk to us, that want our services, but we just don't have the team to service everybody right now. So right now, my biggest challenge is, all right, how do we meet the need or meet the demands of all the different people that want to work with us? A year from now, it's probably going to be content. We need to build our own community. We need to develop our own community, but we need content to do that. How do we, as a event organization company, create a content pipeline? And then those challenges are going to change, from month to month, if not year to year.
Absolutely. Okay, for profit or nonprofit?
We're a for-profit organization.
Okay, now how do you make your money?
So right now, our primary revenue streams are sponsorships and just event fees. So we charge the colleges a flat rate for their teams to participate in our events, and then we seek sponsors to sponsor our events to help subsidize the cost.
Okay, fantastic. And how are you guys planning on scaling? Like, I know you currently, you're, it's the issue you have right now, but what's the plan?
So mostly we need to develop processes across several disciplines that allow us to do heavy front end lifts and then just, minor small lifts after that initial lift is completed. So for example, some of the biggest deliverables that we have as a company to our college partners is that we provide them with all the marketing materials that they need to promote their own team. One of the big needs that we found was that even colleges that do have varsity esports programs, a lot of them don't have like the full weight of their college administration behind them to support them. Yeah, they might have a facility, but they don't have a marketing team. They don't have communications. They don't have like any of the promotional support that a football team might have. We take on all of that. So we provide colleges with promotional graphics to promote their upcoming games, provide them with promotional graphics when their team wins, as well as video clips with highlights from their previous games to help promote their own team within their organization and outside of their organization.
Well, that's wonderful. All right. So that's fantastic. You guys are doing great work. Now, can I talk about you a little more personally if we can, Tom? Like, that's
Absolutely.
fantastic. What makes you special? Like, what makes you good at this job today?
Lots of trial and error. If another thing that you will hear everyone who's gone to business school will say this. I failed so much. Holy crap, have I tried
Darn
a
right.
lot of different things. I would go so far as to say is I have a whole failed career behind me as a designer.
Hey, I used to be an attorney. I'm right there with you.
You have to fail a whole lot before you really learn what you want to do. And the thing that's interesting about failure is that it hurts a whole lot at first, but the more you get used to it, the more you realize that failure is very seldom final in any way. And very rarely is it actually a big deal in the long term. And more often than not, what you learn from that failure is going to be applicable for years and years and years and years after the pain of that failure fades away.
I love it. Okay, now, if you could go back in time and you could talk to little Tom just as he was going into college, before he's even declared a major, all right? And you could tell him, everything that's going to happen over the next several years, what's going to go on. But here's the one thing he needs to know. What is that one thing?
Oh, man. I'd be so afraid of like changing any of that trajectory. I would tell him to not be afraid of his failures. When I was younger, every little dropped ball turned into like this huge pain point for me. I'd be so upset that I just fell short, and I would just want him to know that it's okay. It's totally fine. There are individuals who are paid hundreds of millions of dollars a year that fail every single day. There are failures that have resulted in huge losses for companies. There are failures that have been way more catastrophic than anything you've ever done. Just because you messed up one assignment in college does not mean you need to beat yourself up. Learn the lesson and do better next time.
For sure. And just because you got a degree in one thing does not mean your life is locked into it.
100%.
Okay. So, what advice would you have for an up and coming entrepreneur? I mean, you've started your own businesses and now you're kind of running this business to some extent, supporting the CEO. But what advice do you have for someone looking to get started in something?
Before you even take any of your first steps, you need to have like solid expectation management. One of the hardest things about especially graduating when I did, I graduated my undergrad in 2011. The last 10 years, there's been a lot of real struggle with graduates going from, all right, I'm a senior in college this year, and now all of a sudden I have to be a professional. And if I'm not a professional right now, I'm completely failing and I'm not doing it, and it's all terrible and wrong. College doesn't prepare you for a career, not really. College teaches you a discipline. It gives you a tool, and that tool is probably going to be, what we call in business school a core competency. But that's not the only thing that you need. You need experience. You need to know how to interact with your coworkers. You need to know how to interact with like outside partners. You need to know what are good decisions in certain situations, what are bad decisions. And the simple fact of the matter is you can't get that out of school. It's just not possible. You there is no way that you can learn experience without actually experiencing it. So I would say, rather than setting your expectation of being, I'm going to graduate school and then be a professional, you need to set it as, I'm going to graduate school and then I need to think about where I want to be after that and try and reverse engineer your steps to get there. Like if you want to be a game designer, okay, so you go to school, you learn all this stuff about game design. Where do game companies look for their talent, and how do people broadcast their talent? There was somebody on Reddit a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, who gave himself a project of just, I'm going to replicate mechanics from other games and post them to Reddit, and that's all I'm going to do. So he replicated the lock-on mechanics from Legend of Zelda. He replicated the dodging mechanics from Dark Souls, replicated the shooting mechanics from Destiny, and he just learned all of these different processes so that when he interviews with a potential employer, like a game company, he can say, well, I have experience doing these specific things.
Beautiful.
Setting the expectation to work in steps would be the best advice that I could give you.
I love that. And how does that apply on the esports side? Because that's where you're currently at.
So it kind of falls apart at the esports side because nobody knows what we're doing right now.
Well, in terms of expectations, because
right.
I every single day I get messages, how do I become a professional player? Right?
Right. So if you want to be a professional player, you need to log 10,000 plus hours into your game and just be the best in the world. I mean, the pipeline for that is pretty clear. Enter competitions, win the competitions. If you're not winning the competitions, then you're not going to be able to be a pro player. And that's like the harsh truth behind it. But being a pro player is far from the only role that is needed within esports. For every pro player, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other roles out there that support this industry. 100%. So what I would do, for anyone who wants to work in esports, put the esports part of it aside and look at what are the different roles that go into making an esports event. You have production, you have management, and then you have broadcast. So are you interested in managing volunteers, for example? Do you like to work with people? Do you like to, communicate, between your boss and then a couple of people beneath you to make one task happen? Then volunteer management makes total sense for you. If you love the programs that are used in production, like OBS, and Splitstream, I forget the name of all of them because that's not my realm. But if you already know a little bit about those programs and you're interested in them and you think they're fun, great. That's a direction to move in. You kind of have to think of yourself as a subject matter expert in a thing, and then just see where that thing that you know a lot about plugs in to the organization you want to work for.
Absolutely. Okay, I love it. Now let's pull back a little bit from esports and gaming a bit. Talk about you. You see, okay. I believe that we learn the most in our lives from our failures, and we had that little discussion there not too long ago about you have to fail. But it's when you get smacked in the face, knocked down, that you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, figure out what happened, and then you can move forward. So I'd like to ask you, Tom, what do you consider your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure in life? Definitely the way that I kind of washed out of my last career as a game designer, or not as a game designer, as a graphic designer. It's kind of hard to look back on my time as an illustrator and designer because I know a million things that I would have done differently. I've always been a very hard worker. That's like, if I had to say I have a superpower, I'll just work. However much work needs to be done, I'll just do it until it's done. I was not always a very smart worker, though. I was a very, very dumb worker for a very long time. And I would spend hours and hours and hours just trying to do the same thing and getting the same poor result. So my biggest failure was not learning from my failures as a designer. And I had to lose an entire career and potential future before I could finally learn the lesson of, accepting and learning from my failures.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Now, what is something you're working to improve on in yourself today?
So it's funny, I'm trying to actually get back to that part of myself. I spent years not making any kind of art, not really doing anything creative outside of game design, which was creative, but a very different language in terms of like creative languages. And I still love art. I still I don't know if you can see my wall back there.
Oh, yeah.
I collect as much art as I can get my hands on. I probably have more art in tubes and in flat files than I do on my walls. And I love it and I want to get back into it. So I'm trying to let that part of myself out a little bit and spend a little bit more time being creative.
Okay. And I got one more fun question for you to wrap this up. All right.
Okay.
What is something that people seem to misunderstand about you the first time they meet you?
The misunderstand about me the first time that they meet me. I would say that a lot of people think that I get more frustrated than I actually do get. I would say, for as much as we've talked about failure, I get very frustrated with myself when I do something wrong or something doesn't go the way I expected to. And I think a lot of people I'm a very, outgoing. I come from an Italian family. We talk with our hands. We're very loud. And I think a lot of people think that I am a lot more frustrated than I actually am. Me, exclaiming my frustration is just part of, the healing process and the learning process for me. So I would say that's probably the biggest misunderstanding that people have.
All right. Okay. Now I don't want to wrap up quite yet. What else do you want to tell us about Philly Esports? What did you want to tell me when you wanted to come on the show?
Sure. So we literally this month in October, we launched our first full college league. We're working with 6 different colleges that are local to the Philadelphia area, and we are running a 8-game Rocket League series. Broadcasting every Wednesday night and Thursday night, starting at 7 p.m. EST on our channel, twitch.tv/phillyesports. It's been very competitive. We've got a couple of teams that are almost undefeated, but then a couple that came in and cut the legs out from underneath them. It's been a really great time. If anyone is interested in competitive Rocket League, I would highly ask you. I would very much like it if you went and checked out our channel and took a look at some of the VODs, and follow us, contact us, leave us comments, and let us know how we're doing. What does our production even look like? This is our test league, to see what doing some of these bigger events, how that works for us. Any feedback any of your viewers would like to give us, I would greatly appreciate.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Now, bouncing off of that, how do people find you? Where are you guys at on social media? Where are you at on social media, Tom?
So I'm an old timer, so I don't do the social media thing all that much. But Philly Esports, Instagram, or was Instagram.com/phillyesports, Twitter.com/phillyesports, Twitch.tv/phillyesports. It's very easy to find us. If you type Philly Esports and then whichever social media platform you are looking for, you will find us on it.
Beautiful. All right. Now, as we wrap up, are there any final thoughts you want to share, or anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
Anything that you didn't ask that we still need to cover? Oh my. The only thing that I would want to add is, just because I love working in esports, I absolutely love it. That doesn't mean that I don't work. The adage of, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, I have a little feedback on that. You will work, but you should want to work. There's going to be days that are going to be hard. There's going to be days where you're frustrated, but that's okay, because if you're where you should be, the idea of overcoming those frustrations should far outweigh the frustrations themselves.
Heck yeah. I love it. Tom, thank you so much for coming on. I genuinely appreciate it. This was a blast.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.